In early spring, usually as early as March when the first grass appears, Turkmen shepherds, chabans, set out with their flocks of sheep for the summer pastures, where they remain until October or November. Little has changed in the life of the chaban over many, many years. A light, collapsible kibitka wagon and a pen for the sheep. You could be standing at a shepherd's camp today and think it's a century ago. The pastures lie around a freshwater well, called in Turkmen a gui, which, as a rule, is located far from any settlement or people. Many wells, some centuries old, still bear the name of the man who dug them, hence names like Ahmed Gui or Bayashim Gui. A shepherd's work is arduous and often dangerous, and therefore he enjoys great respect. Shepherding skills are frequently passed down from father to son. By the time he is 15 or 16, a son may already begin to work independently. Every morning the chaban, mounted on a donkey to which his food and water are strapped in a kurgan, saddlebag, drives the flock out to pasture, then returns it to the well in the evening. To prevent the sheep from overgrazing and trampling all the grass in one spot, the route is varied slightly each day. It's as if every day the flock encircles a new petal of a daisy, its center the well. New day, new petal. The shepherd's sole weapon is a sharp dagger. Only relatively recently, in the 1960s, were chabans and collective farms issued rifles to protect their sheep from predators. But this practice did not take hold. It turned out that the shepherd's most effective weapon is the choban it, his guardian dogs. If a flock is protected by 2 or 3 powerful wolfhounds, rifles become unnecessary, expensive pens can be dispensed with, and the number of human shepherds can be kept to a minimum. In summer, a chaban typically keeps with his flock 1 adult male, 1 or 2 bitches, and several pups aged 5 or 6 months. This number of dogs is quite sufficient to guard a flock of up to 1,000 sheep. By day, they accompany the flock to pasture and at the slightest excuse, seek out shade to escape the heat. At such times, they are relatively inactive and appear clumsy. Their real work begins at twilight. The jackal and the wolf are the shepherd's main enemies. The jackal is numerous but small. It may attack a lamb, but even an adolescent dog can deal with it, and it poses little threat to adult sheep. The wolf, by contrast, is far more terrifying, large, brazen, and merciless. Once it breaks into a flock, drunk on blood, it slashes indiscriminately. It usually attacks at night when the sheep are gathered near the well in their pen or simply bunched together. Turkmen chabans say the wolf population has recently increased greatly, and it is no longer uncommon for a wolf, unafraid of humans, to attack livestock in broad daylight and in their owner's presence. Moreover, there have appeared wolves that aren't our wolves, much larger than the local ones. At first, we met these reports with skepticism, but they came from many shepherds grazing their flocks in different places, so we decided, if only for peace of mind, to verify them. Here is what we discovered. In 1986, 2 groups of wolves were brought from Russia for use in a film. The tame and well-trained animals from Moscow were sent back after filming, but 9 others were released into the Bred nature reserve. Among them were 4 Siberian wolves and 5 wolves captured in the forests of Leningrad Oblast. About 4 years later, another group of forest wolves was imported into Turkmenistan and set free. Crossbreeding with the local stock has resulted in this predator becoming larger in Turkmenistan. Among the guardian dogs, there is a clear division of labor within the pack. When during their rounds they detect a predator by scent or hear the faintest suspicious rustle, the pups are the first to raise the alarm. The bitches come charging to their aid with loud barks. Usually this is enough to drive off jackals. But if the commotion does not subside, the wolves have arrived, and then the adult male, the pack's leader, stands up and restores order. The wolves, sensing a formidable opponent, prefer not to fight and typically withdraw. The entire pack pursues them, but only to a boundary marked by the leader about 150, 200 meters from the flock. Yet there is a more serious enemy of the Alabai these days, the increasingly numerous hyena. Contrary to popular belief, the hyena does not feed only on carrion. It will readily take a kid or a sheep. We were told of a clash between a 7-year-old wolfhound and a hyena at dusk, when twilight was descending on the steppe. A hyena had slipped into the pen, seized a kid, and bolted with it. At the noise, the dog rushed to the chase. Catching up with the thief, he knocked it to the ground with his chest, and after a furious struggle, tore open its belly. A 1.5-year-old male then arrived, seized the bleeding beast by the throat, and throttled it. The older dog collapsed in exhaustion a few steps away, but the shepherds have no doubt that had the younger dog not arrived, the elder alone would have brought down the hyena. It should be noted that neither dog was exceptionally large or massive, just ordinary lean working dogs. Their reward was the kid pride from the hyena. Turkmen's prize in the Alabai height, bone structure, massiveness, and beauty, but above all pure blood and working qualities, preserving, which is undoubtedly more difficult and important than merely breeding dogs that conform to an exterior ideal without regard for the breed's distinctive psyche. We regard aggression toward predators and other canines as one of the most important breed traits of the Turkmen wolfhound. Without it, no matter how beautiful, a dog is worthless. This breed has remained in its primal form largely because, for millennia, a strict natural selection has operated. Only the strongest and best adapted individuals survive, and the finest among them become sires. During the breeding season, a bitch need not mate with the pack's leader. At her scent, local males from near flocks gather, and real battles erupt among them. Only the strongest, who prove in combat their right to pass on their blood, succeeds. They tell of Shakan, father of the legendary Akash, who covered all the bitches in the Kashka area, where about 50 flocks grazed, and had to win countless duels. Artificial selection was no less rigorous. Shepherds always kept for breeding the largest, most massive dogs of proper type, strong, fearless, known for their victories over predators and in combat rings. They were keen judges of working qualities, discarding lazy, cowardly dogs, and even those that barked without cause at night. Hence, among Turkmen wolfhounds, you almost never find loudmouths. When it is time to whelp, a bitch digs a den near the camp in soil, sometimes so hard that even a mattock won't penetrate. The den often has a 2 or 3 meter entrance tunnel ending in a fairly spacious chamber. Births typically occur without human assistance. If there are many pups, male pups are preferred and kept, while the surplus females are buried. A few days after birth, the male pup's ears and tails are cut with a knife. This is not always done to females. Until recently, ears were simply torn off, often leading to closure of the ear canal. Nowadays, this is almost never done. Shepherds explain ear and tail cropping as a way to avoid injuries in fights with predators or during male combat, and they claim it sharpens hearing. Tails are cropped so that when curled around, the dog's nose is not covered, preserving scenting ability. The mother licks the wounds. If bleeding does not stop, shepherds sprinkle ashes from the fire or cauterize with a hot knife blade. To prevent worms, they give a piece of sheepskin with wool. Working dogs treat themselves by eating grass, especially in spring when it is still green. After wolf encounters, shepherds have noted dogs' teeth loosen. Some even believe wolves have poisonous hides. Shepherds treat the dog's gums with sheep tail fat. That is all their indigenous veterinary medicine. The Turkmen wolfhound matures very slowly. Only at 3 to 4 years does he take on his final form, becoming a powerful, massive animal. Before then, young dogs often look lanky. A typical native dog is not aggressive toward humans. Usually, he merely barks to warn his master of a stranger's approach, but does not attack. In his owner's presence, the dog is friendly and calm. Any of them can be petted, handled, measured, or even have their teeth checked. In the owner's absence, especially at night, the Alabai's behavior changes sharply. From a good-natured, seemingly clumsy, sun-baked lounger, he becomes an alert guard, actively protecting his territory. Moreover, the Turkmen wolfhound has a very strong sense of territoriality. After dark, anyone crossing the boundary, which the dog often defines himself, will be stopped by a low, menacing growl. But even then, an attack usually does not follow, provided the intruder heeds the warning and does not try to defy it. In rural Turkmenistan, unlike other parts of Central Asia, yards are not commonly enclosed by solid fences. Property boundaries are most often marked by a purely symbolic fence or a ditch about 10 centimeters wide and of the same depth. But the Alabai's keen territorial sense allows them to be kept off-leash. Neighboring males living side by side get along peacefully without fights, so long as none crosses another's boundary. But when two dogs meet in a neutral zone, near inevitably a showdown ensues, even between previously amicable neighbors. There are among Turkmen dogs some vicious individuals, notably in some lines of the white Yekemen, but the vast majority, despite their formidable appearance, are actually good-natured toward people. This is due partly to upbringing and partly to the long-standing custom of eliminating vicious dogs. They are typically destroyed. Of course, fear of rabies also plays a role. Unfortunately, in recent times, the services tasked with combating rabies have not always acted diligently. Under the guise of culling stray animals, they poison purebred dogs. We have often heard when visiting to examine a dog that it is already dead because it ate bait tossed over the fence. And usually a list follows of neighbors whose dogs were also poisoned that same day, sometimes whole streets and blocks. Thus, in May 1999, even the champion of Turkmenistan, the 8-year-old Kor Gaplan of Miana in the Kakaka district, perished. It was a tragedy for all who knew Kor. He was laid to rest in a proper funeral, attended by every villager. That same day, his mated bitch was poisoned. She was due to whelp in a day or two. In a desperate attempt to save the pups, Kor's owner, the zoo technician Kakberdi, performed a cesarean on the dead bitch, removed 9 pups, and placed them with a recently delivered bitch. But unfortunately, the pups lived only a day, apparently poisoned by toxin transmitted through their foster mother's milk. Dog fighting. Is it an expression of human cruelty or a pastime born of the chabans' boredom that has spread beyond Turkmenistan? Sport or sublimation of an inferiority complex? Debates over it are nothing new. There are countless rumors and legends. Fights have many opponents who demand their ban, and just as many advocates ready to travel to the ends of the earth to take part in a tournament or watch as spectators. They are held in Ukrainian stadiums under police guard, and in Moscow they are broken up by the police. The president of Kazakhstan sends official greetings to participants at an international meeting in October, while in Tashkent their staging is prohibited. Our aim is not to persuade readers of their necessity, only to ask that, armed with benevolent skepticism, you read how we conduct them, and then make up your own minds. Alabai fights in Turkmenistan are not only a centuries-old folk tradition and an exciting spectacle that draws many participants and spectators, but also one of the most important zoo technical events that have allowed this large, fearless, strong, and beautiful dog to be created and preserved to this day. Internationally, the breed is represented by Russia as the USSR's legal successor. The standard it proposed was approved by the FCI and remains in force. In our view, this standard contains several provisions we cannot agree with. For instance, naming Russia as the country of origin, as if for several thousand years the peoples who actually formed the breed did not exist, and certain key points concerning confirmation. It is surprising that during the drafting of the standard, its authors did not consult the opinions of those who work with the breed in its traditional regions. The future of the breed, whether it is called the Turkmen, Central Asian Wolfhound, or the Central Asian Shepherd, depends on all of us dog breeders living in the Central Asian republics, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and other regions where the most populous herds are found. Unfortunately, the often declared calls to preserve this ancient and therefore unique breed remain largely mere declarations. In reality, at shows, you often see prize-winning dogs that only barely belong to the breed. On the one hand, some become ever more like typical shepherd dogs. On the other, there appear dogs that make one suspect infusion of Dog de Bordeaux, Saint Bernard, or even Moscow Guard blood. The number of both is growing, and soon dogs from Turkmenistan and other traditional areas may look out of place among representatives of the cultural population. Instead of consolidating the breed, regional types are beginning to emerge or have already emerged. In Ukraine, for example, many dogs of great height and massive build have acquired loose skin, jowly muzzles, pronounced stop, and high-set ears uncharacteristic of Asiatics. In Moscow, a well-known kennel that once had a fine stock suddenly displayed a series of tall, long-legged dogs with tucked-up loins and round heads at a major show, and it was explained to the assembled public that this was one of the existing regional types in Central Asia. For centuries, the breed survived under natural selection, with only the most adapted individuals living to adulthood. Males strong enough to deal with seasoned predators and to win fights during the breeding season. Under artificial selection, the chabans followed the same guideline, keeping for breeding the strongest, bravest dogs. Selecting sires was based on working qualities, but also on conformation, since those best suited anatomically for such fights were most likely to win. Typically, they chose large, athletically built males renowned as predator hunters, fearless guards, or champions of the fighting rings held at local festivals. Nature endowed the wolfhounds with immense strength, impervious skin, powerful jaws, and good respiratory systems, and their constant clashes with predators honed their fighting skills to perfection. It could be no other way, for any mistake or weakness meant death at the fangs of a predator. Subscribe to the channel to learn a lot of useful information about real Turkmen wolfhounds.